Well, Mike McCarthy has officially been introduced as the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach today in his introductory press conference. And we'll dive into all of that today. Welcome into Believe in Steelers. Jarrett Bailey, Todd Haley with you as always. We're powered by FanDuel. Todd, whenever the announcement was made that Mike McCarthy was going to be the guy, I had mixed feelings about it. There's pros, there's cons, and we'll spend the next however long diving into that before regular season games are played again in Pittsburgh. But the big thing that was evident right away in the press conference was, oh man, this means everything to this guy. And we can put aside how you think it's going to go, any other candidates you may have wanted. Seeing him get choked up before he could even start talking and talking about Pittsburgh's my world and, being from Pittsburgh and now coaching the team, like seeing him get that emotional about it from a human aspect. I mean, it's hard not to root for Mike McCarthy right now.
Yeah. How could you not feel good about, what you saw and heard? And I don't, there's a lot of people in Pittsburgh that didn't grow up in Pittsburgh that are now, have taken on the Steelers as their team or the Penguins, Pirates, whatever it is. But if you grew up there like you did, like I did, and you lived and died, Steelers, Penguins, Pirates. I mean, it's really kind of how at least a ton of young men, but even young women that's what their world revolved around. And Mike McCarthy was one of those. Obviously, I told you the other day that, I'd go to a Penguin game when I was coaching for the Steelers, and who's sitting, we're going to get some food or whatever, and there's Mike McCarthy. And I mean, he was a legit Penguin fan because, he's from Pittsburgh. So, yeah, I mean, if you can't, at least feel good about that, I could relate 100%. I did that same press conference as a coordinator. The Steelers was my dream job growing up. Tim Feeney, he was a ball boy for 50 years for the Steelers. He's 6'9". He runs the clothing jersey making thing in Mount Lebanon. He's from Mount Lebanon. He called me last night, ironically, just wanting to talk about this a little bit. He's seen everything. I mean, he's seen Chuck Noll. He's seen George Perlis. He's seen Jack Lambert. He's seen Terry Bradshaw. I mean, he was my boss when I was a teenager going through high school, working the sideline with him. And, there's something different. It's just different. It's not a transient city generally, like some newer cities throughout the country that everybody's kind of transplanted. I mean, it's, if you're a Pittsburgher, you're a Pittsburgher. And to hear I love the accent. I mean, a lot of people, I hear some of the words and I'm like, yeah, he's a Pittsburgher. So, and I talked to you a little bit about, I think the Rooneys in general, whether it was the Chief or Dan or Art the Second, they care about that. And I think that probably was a pretty big factor, but, now this is what it is. As I said, I mean, I love the emotion. I mean, that tells me he really, really cares. He said about his family, we finally can wear Steelers swag. I felt that same thing. I'm working for other teams, but then deep down, I'm kind of seeing what the Steelers are doing. And when I got the job, I'm like, yes, give me as much Steelers stuff as we can get. Everybody's wearing it, wear it to school. It's what makes it special. I remember as a kid, when the Steelers were great and I was a little kid, but we'd go, out to eat with my father and family, and, waitresses have terrible towels draped around their neck. They got buttons, Steelers, Myron Cope, the whole thing. It made a huge impression. So, for Mike McCarthy, he's a little older than me, but basically grew up in that same era. And if you're a football guy that ends up in football, and you get a chance, and you grow up in Pittsburgh and get a chance to coach for the Steelers, I mean, it is a special, special moment. So I understand that emotion.
I think maybe more than any in the NFL, Pittsburgh and maybe Green Bay, like however the team does, that kind of defines how the city's feeling. Like more than anything, Pittsburgh revolves around the Steelers. And like I said, maybe Green Bay would be a close second in terms of, just how intertwined their teams are with that community. Um, and he even said it himself, growing up, I think he gave his address when he was a kid. He's like, when we win a seventh championship, I just want the parade to start at 1137 Greenfield. And it's like, all right, man, like he's so bought into this in particular. And this is a guy that's, won a Super Bowl with Green Bay, had a lot of success with Dallas. Can you imagine going through life and being able to be the head coach of the Packers, Cowboys, and Steelers? I mean, the three maybe most iconic franchises in the NFL, and now he gets to kind of put the exclamation point on that by being in Pittsburgh, and it's just really cool for him, again, from a human aspect. But questions were asked that fans wanted to know answers to. I believe it was Tim Benz of the Trib, point blank asked him, like, hey, do you want Aaron to be back next year? And refreshingly so, Mike McCarthy was like, yeah. Like he didn't mince words. He's like, yeah, definitely. I'd love to have Aaron back. What are your thoughts on that? The potential of Aaron coming back with Mike McCarthy. Do you think it's a smart idea? Do you think they should look elsewhere?
Well, I think he answered it well. Tough question, he probably knew it was coming, but sure. You got to answer that one right, at least right now. We know that, first time opening press conferences for a new head coach, whether he's an old head coach, a young head coach, first time, second time, third time, in this case, that this isn't going to really mean anything to anybody, that cares about the Steelers, once things start going. So, you got to navigate some of that. And that is, the fact that he's been there, done that in Dallas, in Green Bay, where, as you said, yeah, if you grow up in Green Bay, your entire week revolves around how the Packers did. And if you grow up in Pittsburgh, same things. Dallas, they love their Cowboys, but a little different. I worked for the Cowboys, not quite the same, in my opinion. I mean, everybody lives and dies with what happens with the Steelers within the season, these type of moments. I mean, it's what everybody cares about. So, but the fact that he's been there, done that, navigated some tough situations at the podium, it gave him the ability to be real, genuine. That's what I felt. And I know him a little bit, I've been around him and I've always liked him, but that's what I felt. I felt genuine, heartfelt, feelings for this opportunity. I know that he's a good coach. I know that he can, he does understand quarterback play. I heard some of the Will Howard questions and things like that, but, I think some of that beginning part is just navigating it, whatever's getting, and maybe Aaron's back, and I love Aaron Rodgers and I thought he was the best option, but now year two, do I feel the same way? I don't know. You'd have to give me a little more information about who's around him and all those type things. But, I thought, again, what I felt was genuine love for the Steelers, even though, when you're a coach in the NFL, and I grew up with the Steelers, I mean, everything was Pittsburgh. But when I started my coaching career, I started with the Jets. I was then a Jets guy. Everything in the house was Jets. When I went to the Bears, we burned it all or gave it away. Who wants this stuff? But the Steelers, having grown up in Pittsburgh, been around the NFL and around football the way he's been, I just appreciate his opportunity to come back and try to do something great.
Yeah. And you brought up the Will Howard stuff. He was like, I'm very excited to work with Will Howard. Very much the accent came out a few times during the press conference. Although I know we're going to see fans who see those quotes and are like, oh, you see, look at that. Will Howard's the future. And my whole pushback is like, what did you want him to say? Nah, not really enticed by him. Like, it's very much coach speak. more or less at this time. I mean, you would know more so than anybody who's been in these press conferences and whatnot. What else is he gonna say? He could very well be excited to work with Will Howard, but he could also be enticed by him and maybe have thoughts that this still probably isn't the guy.
Yeah, and I said that. I said who answered that question. Now I said that to you. I think it was yesterday we were on, but I've talked to some guys going through the head coaching interview process, and I always ask that, what they say about the quarterback position. Not in this case, but other teams, and like they didn't really talk about the quarterback, and I'm like, what? That's the biggest issue at hand. So, I think for Mr. Rooney and the Steelers, it's about getting, the right type of guy in there with the right resume, the right ability, and if you pick an offensive minded head coach, Mike McCarthy's been around long enough that, don't think for a second he isn't, talking about defense, involved with the defensive meetings, all those things, because he is. Now, if you were talking about a young guy that just, cut his teeth, coaching offense, it'd be a little different. But a guy like Mike, he gets it. The only off-putting thing to me a little bit was just, when he was very honest, and he said, I've been a head coach how many years, and I've had one top five defense, and it was the year we won the Super Bowl. So, I would think that's got to be at the top of the list. If I'm, deciding whether he's the head coach of the Steelers or not, who is your defensive coordinator, your defensive staff, who's on your wish list, because you don't always get everybody you want. It's tough, especially with a lot of moving parts going on within the league. It's not a guarantee you're going to get exactly who you come into that interview saying these are the guys.
I would like to think that they would swing heavy for a good defensive coordinator this coming cycle. Raheem Morris did a tremendous job as a defensive coordinator when he was with the Rams, which led to him getting the head coach job in Atlanta. Obviously, he's no longer the head coach in Atlanta, and is still, I believe, on the market. I don't think he got hired anywhere else. There was reports, I think Mark Cabali put out that they were going to interview Jason Simmons, former Steelers defensive back. He's the current defensive pass game coordinator for the Commanders. And, I don't know much about Jason Simmons, but I know that the Commanders defense wasn't very good last year. So, I mean, that might be something to, stow away when we're talking about this. There's plenty of names that are going to come up, and we'll see. But I think he also noted that he planned to stick with the scheme at hand, kind of being that 3-4 base.
That was a good part of the press conference as far as I was concerned, because I've been there going in as a head coach that wanted to run a 3-4 that's been a predominantly 4-3 team. That's a major overhaul of trying to find those right pieces. So the defense is in place. I mean, there's not just the big names. I mean, TJ and everybody involved, but there's other guys that have been being developed, by a really good defensive coaching staff. So, to disrupt that, I think would have been a major thing. So when I heard that, I was like, okay, that's a really good sign.
Yeah, and even if you do want a defensive change, like you just said, are you gonna put TJ's hand in the dirt? He's not like a prototypical defensive end. He's an outside linebacker. Same thing with Highsmith. Same thing with Herbig. Like, you can want to run a 4-3 all you want, but you got to have the pieces to do it. And right now, like they're built. I mean, they are a 3-4 defense. It makes sense to continue that. If he wants to change it in the future, in a couple of years, whatever. But that's something that I think, and you would know better, it happens gradually, where you get the pieces to do it over time and not just overnight.
Yeah, and the people in the front office, starting with Art, they know that. They've been through this. It's been a long time, but they've been through it. And if I'm an offensive coordinator preparing to play a Steelers 4-3 with TJ out there, as great a player as he is, I'd have a tight end over there. I'd have a tackle, and we'd be just trying to demolish him as much as we possibly could. So, yeah, no, I was really happy when I heard that. I think that's good news for them going forward, because you for years have been drafting, developing, the free agency, whatever it is, you've been, getting these certain type body types that, fit within that scheme that's been run for a long time.
He also made it known he's going to be the offensive play caller. So that puts any sort of, questions on who is going to be the play caller to bed. Were you the play caller when you were in Kansas City?
2 of the 3 years, but the first year a little often. I might have switched probably 2.5 years somewhere. Yeah, it's how what your strengths are, and I appreciate I'm going to be the overseer of everything, but if you're really good at something, which he has been for a long time, that's how he became a head coach in the first place, is that ability and feel to go through a game and call it. So I kind of learned that as I navigated as a first time head coach, that once you feel, when you're thinking one thing and you hear another, it's like, wait a minute, this isn't, and every head coach that doesn't call the plays goes through it.
Mm-hmm. So take me through, and take everybody listening through, because this is fascinating on a certain level, because I think that there's a good portion of fans who don't, completely discredit coordinators who don't call plays, but there is a level of like, all right, well then what do they do on game day? So when you're the offensive play caller, as the head coach, what is your offensive coordinator doing through the week and in game compared to if you weren't the play caller?
Yeah, it's still a huge job, because as a head coach, I mean, you got to do a radio, a weekly head coach's radio deal. You got to do media. You got to do, might have to do a couple functions where you just have to show up for a half hour. But there's not enough time in the week as a coach to get ready. So, I did it with Kenny Wisenhunt. When early in my time with the Cardinals, he was the play caller. That's how I got the job. But I had to kind of do everything else during the week, and then at the back end of the week, get him up to speed with what I loved, didn't like, and then as we continued to kind of go through that process, at some point, halfway, maybe even earlier, through that season, he's like, I'm going to give you a shot and let's see what you do. And, but so that job is big. I mean, you are scripting. Head coach every single night of the week is not scripting practice. And that is, when you script a practice, it's first down, it's second down and short, it's second down and long, it's third and short, it's third and medium, it's third and long. Then you get into third down, third and short, third and medium, third and long. And then you get into red zone. Then you get it. So when you, as a coordinator, even if you're not calling the plays, you are diagramming the entire practice. And as the week goes on, plays that the quarterback loves, that look pretty good out there on the practice field, all that. The head coach is worrying about the defense. He's talking to the media, so it's your job as a non-play calling coordinator to then get the head coach up to speed. As once you get to Friday, Kenny Wisenhunt and I would spend 2-3 hours when everybody else went home on a Friday, before a game, we would spend it together talking through every one of those potential situations, and him just listening, to the things that I'm like, listen, this play sucks. Don't, I would take it off the call sheet if I were you. And it might have been a play that he came up with. You'll pop into the game planning process, but that's Tuesdays. I mean, Tuesdays as a head coach, you have so many different things you have to do. So, that position, I would never underplay that. And you've seen some guys that were in that position, Sean McVay being one of them, that wasn't a play caller, and then all of a sudden he became the head coach and he called the plays, and he's pretty good at it. Now, we might have some disagreements in the game last weekend of decision making, but not necessarily play calls. So, it kind of gets underplayed. People are like, well, the head coach is calling plays, but if you don't think Sean Payton isn't getting a lot of help through the week, from his staff, getting him prepared to go out there and make the decisions he has to make. But, it's a unique skill set. It's not, there's great coaches that just can't, they don't have that feel to call plays. And then there's coaches that might not even be the best coaches, but man, they can call a great game.
Speaking of Sean Payton, as we're recording, the Broncos fired offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi. So some news out of Denver after losing in the AFC Championship.
Joe probably stood on the table for that sprint out 4th and 1 play.
Yeah, maybe we'll get details on that. Well, we shall see. Continue talking about that though, because as an offensive minded head coach like Mike is, like you were, how do you go about the defense and whatnot? Like, how much of say do you have? Obviously you oversee everything, but like, how hands-on were you with the defense when you were the head guy in Kansas City?
Well, I think if you lean towards the offensive side, unless you've had both side of the ball experience, like you brought up Raheem Morris, he's a defensive minded guy, but then, where was it, the Rams, where they had him helping on offense or whatever. So, Mike Tomlin, I'll say, he played wide receiver in college, so he had that offensive background, but, a defensive minded guy, if you're strictly, that's all you've really done. I mean, I think then through years of experience, like Mike McCarthy has, you sit in on those same meetings. You may not be a vocal point or a focal point early in your career, but as you sit and listen to the defensive coaches, I mean, there's a coordinator, there's a D-line coach, there's a secondary coach. I think as a head coach, it's your job to make sure, because sometimes guys get like a little tunnel vision when they're assistant coaches. If they're coaching the line, that's all they care about is their line, how many sacks they got, tackle, blah, blah, blah. But they're not looking at how that connects to the secondary, because we know rush and coverage goes together. So, I was fortunate enough to, coach for Bill Parcells very early in my career, and there wasn't many days that he didn't stop in my office. I'm a slappy, quality control, helping the, assistant receiver coach. And he would stop in and say, listen, Todd, don't just think about the receivers, think big picture. There's a lot of pieces going into this. And I think when you do hire an experienced guy, I think you have a chance of getting that. Is it guaranteed? No. We saw Pete Carroll, for whatever reason, I think we all thought, he's going to go to the Raiders. They got this young back that's going to be a star. They signed Geno Smith. It's going to all be roses, and it didn't work out that way. Now, was that because Pete Carroll's not a good CEO, head coach of a team? No, not necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of factors out there in place. You got Tom Brady, you got Chip Kelly, you got a lot of moving parts, that worried me from the start. So, but when you get an experienced guy that's been around some great coaches, great offenses, great teams, I think that there's a different level of competency, I would say, as opposed to a first-year guy that just has been focused on one area to get to where he wants to get to. And a lot of guys are trying to do that. They're trying to climb. I want to get here, and instead of just really just learning the ins and outs.
On the offensive side of the ball, though, whatever happens there, focus has to be receiver, getting more weapons there for whoever the quarterback is. Obviously the quarterback's the biggest thing, and, we'll come to figure out who that guy's going to be over the next couple months. But they need people who can catch the ball from that quarterback. And he's had a good plethora of them throughout his career, both in Green Bay early on, whether it was Greg Jennings and Donald Driver, and then into Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams, and then with Dallas and CeeDee Lamb. He's always had like a very good tandem of weapons for whether it be Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers and then Dak Prescott to distribute the ball to. And that makes me think that he knows, all right, quarterback's number one, receivers got to be very close after that so we can, have more downfield success. I looked today, the Steelers led the league in passes thrown at or behind the line of scrimmage this season. My assumption is that Mike McCarthy would like that number to go down pretty drastically.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to go back and look at the stats, his last couple of years with Aaron, of how much, because Aaron, he's really cerebral at the line of scrimmage. He understands what he's seeing. He wants to get the ball out of his hands. So, that's neither here nor there. But I think the point you made is, I kind of grew up coaching receivers as a young assistant coach. Mike McCarthy, a little more leaning towards, the quarterback. But those things, as a receiver coach, I understood quarterbacks, and I think that's something that helped me be really successful coaching. The Keyshawn's or the Dwayne Bowes, the Marty Bookers, the Larry Fitzgeralds, because my first thing was I would go to the quarterback. Hey, what do you want here? And quarterback coaches generally, they get that too. They want receivers that can make the quarterback look good. So I think if you're going to pick a group of coaches, it's receiver coaches and quarterback coaches that understand receiver play and what they really want and need, to make the offense go and ultimately to make that quarterback successful.
In terms of guys that we know will not be back on the coaching staff next year, Arthur Smith is no longer in Pittsburgh. He accepted a job to become the Ohio State offensive coordinator, so we know for sure that he won't be back. It was reported today that defensive line coach Carl Dunbar will also not be returning to the staff. So a couple different guys that we know for 100% sure will not be back. I would wonder if Tom Arth, the quarterback coach, would be back, though, because he has a history with Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers. So if there was going to be somebody to come back, I wonder if he would be one of those names. But yeah, we'll find out here soon enough what this staff is going to end up looking like. And as we talked about on the last show, new league year starting March 11th. Usually the legal tampering period is like 2 days before the new league year, so I would assume tampering begins March 9th. I always find that funny, legal tampering, as if we know these conversations.
Wish we had that in real life, don't we? We could just legally tamper for a couple days.
I like how the NFL pretends that they don't know that these conversations aren't happening like now and at the combine and during the all these different bowl all-star games, college all-star games. Like, all right, like I appreciate the fact to pretend to be naive to everything. It is very silly to me.
Yeah, no, that is a funny thing. And now I'm in the camp of I don't like any of this coaching hiring cycle. I'm in that
what do you mean?
group. I just don't like when teams are still playing. I've been that coach, that's having success and there's jobs being opened and then filled. And I was the last guy hired with the Chiefs. I mean, there were very few assistant coaches left. I mean, we had to scrounge around. I mean, ended up, I thought, putting together a pretty good staff, but I truly believe it should be Super Bowl ends. Here's this window. If you have an opening, I think it would eliminate firing guys mid-season, some of those things, which I think is crazy. I mean, how many times has it worked out positively? Bruce Arians, maybe, when his head coach got sick, but very few times mid-season to think. So I would be for season ends. Here we go. Get it all done. Nobody's distracted. Chris Shula isn't worried about interviews, and he can go out there and make sure his Rams defense, covers the number one guy in the field. I'm sorry, I'm beating a dead horse on that one.
No, I think that actually makes sense because, like, if any of these teams with availabilities want to hire Clint Kubiak, they got to wait 2 weeks to be able to talk to him now.
It's not fair to the coach or the team.
No, it's not. And, we saw a team today in Buffalo who, it was very highly expected that, hey, Brian Dable, Grant Yudinski, maybe even Clint Kubiak could be the next guy. They end up hiring Joe Brady from within. So, like, it is a weird time in dealing with this. And, when there's 10 jobs going into the cycle.
And I get why it would be very hard to do because especially with the lengthened season, 17, which probably will be 18 before we know it. There's just not enough time in the off season. So something would have to be majorly adjusted for that to be a reality. But I don't think it's fair to most parties involved, unless you're just a bad team that fires your coach and you pluck the guy you want, right out of the gate. But that's not fair to anybody else.
No, I agree. And if they did do that, the league could find a way to monetize it and like televise it. They do it with a schedule release. You don't think that they could do like a coaching hiring show?
Yeah,
like
here's the cycle.
Yeah, they could absolutely turn it into like a 3-hour special on ESPN and all these networks. Like, all right, here's the NFL head coaching cycle, and that's where you get all the new head coaches announced. Oh, we shouldn't give the league that idea because
that's a good idea right there.
It might be. Yeah. Maybe we should give them that idea. But it's
this year the head coaching cycle is happening in Green Bay, Lambeau.
Oh yeah, they'll just turn it into another draft.
Except you bring the coaches out. They all walk
that's
through.
Smart. It's like you could combine like National Signing Day in college and the draft with the NFL and just have like these coaches sit on stage with 3 hats and just pick which one. I think that's a genius idea, actually. You know what? We need to talk to Raj about this, and we're gonna see if we can get this set up. I think that's actually genius. I'm down. There we go. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We are powered by FanDuel. Do you have any guesses on who's what the number is for the Super Bowl as we record this?
Score?
No, what the spread is as we.
Oh, the number. See, yeah. I'm not let me think here. I'm gonna say Seattle by 3.5 right now.
Seattle by 4.5 right now on FanDuel. So we shall see. And
that was just legit gut feeling. So it's probably got a chance.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe we take Seattle to win and New England to cover at that rate. But appreciate everybody for tuning in. Again, Todd and I will be back both on Believe in Steelers, but also covering the league as a whole in your podcast feed. Todd's going to be telling some stories throughout the offseason that I'm very excited to hear. And I'm sure you're all very excited to hear too, whether it be from his time with the Steelers, time with the Chiefs. He's been with the Jets, been with the Bears, been with the Cowboys, been with so many different teams. And he's got, 3 decades worth of stories from coaching in the NFL. So we'll hear a lot of them this offseason each and every week. So be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review, do all that fun stuff to help us keep tuning into the show. We'll be back later on in the week. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Take care.